Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar sponsored by Moonlighting Solutions. This is Chris Romay. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Ventures team here at MedAxiom. We're going to give it just another minute to let people log on, so please be patient and we'll be with you in just a second. All right. So welcome. We're going to start today's webinar. Today's webinar, again, hosted by Moonlighting Solutions, is Easing the Call Burden, Practical Cardiologist Staffing Strategy to Support Physicians and Protect Outcomes. First, a couple housekeeping items I'd like to cover with you. The first is in the chat button down below your screen. You'll be able to see today's presentation. We'll be putting today's presentation into the chat button, into the chat feature. You can download that, review this at a later time, share it with colleagues, whatever you would like to do with that. Also, during the presentation, we'll be allowing you to ask questions. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. You can pose any questions you would like to the moderators in that button in that area, and we'll be moderating those throughout the course of the webinar, but we're going to be holding those off to the very end. So again, the Q&A button is where you're going to want to post your questions. The chat button is where we're going to have the presentation. So with that, let's get started. We've got three speakers today that are going to be hosting the webinar. Today is Jeff Beneke. He is the Vice President at Centra Heart and Vascular Institute. We've got Allison Mabry. She's the Director, Provider Recruitment, Onboarding, and Retention of Centra. And we're going to be kicking it off with Dr. James Warner. He's the Executive Medical Director, Centra Heart and Vascular Institute. So with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Warner. We'll get started and have a great day.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris, for the introductions. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to be of this webinar sponsored by MedAxiom and Moonlighting Solutions. So just to go over some of the agenda items with the presentation today, I'm going to give you a little idea of what Centra Health and the Heart and Vascular Institute are in Central Virginia. We will talk about our cardiology coverage challenge that was presented several months ago and our search to find sustainable staffing solutions. We'll talk about how we worked at finding the right staffing partner. We will talk about how we built a consensus with the Heart and Vascular Institute cardiologists, as well as how we built a business case to present to the Centra executives. I'll talk about the journey from our decision to the first shift with the Moonlighting Solutions cardiologist. We'll talk about some of the ways that we measure success and some of our early outcomes. And then we'll talk finally about what our plans might be going forward. And then, as Chris mentioned, we will end with the question and answer session. So to talk a little bit more about Centra Health, Centra Health is a regional healthcare system. We serve over 500,000 people in the Central and Southern Virginia regions. We currently have 5 hospitals under Centra, as well as other care settings. We have over 8,100 employees and over 500 providers. Specific to Centra Heart and Vascular Institute, we are one of 9 service lines with Centra Health, and the Heart and Vascular Institute has 6 locations. Our main location is in Lynchburg, but we also have clinics and/or hospitals in Farmville, Bedford, Gretna, Manita, and Amherst. We currently have over 100 providers. 45 of those are physicians and 55 are APPs. We pride ourselves with quality with our Heart and Vascular Institute at Centra. The figures here show a couple of the awards that the Heart and Vascular Institute have received this year in heart failure and chest pain. Dr. Pete O'Brien is our Chief Quality Officer and our Medical Director of the Cath Lab, and he prides himself on the door to balloon times, which he has championed not only in the state of Virginia, but also nationwide. And there are several months where our interventional cardiologists come in under 40 minutes for the month. So let's dig into how we were presented with the cardiology coverage challenge and our search to find sustainable solutions. So going back to 2024, our model for several years has been that 12 of our non-invasive cardiologists and 5 of our electrophysiologists covered general cardiology call. That would be the weeknights and then the weekends. Several years ago, the interventional cardiologists were also in this pool, but they came out to cover their own STEMI coverage 24/7. So we, for the last few years, have had 17 physicians participating in general cardiology call. Every weekend, we had 2 cardiologists that covered call. One primarily took the calls on Saturday and the other on Sundays. So if you look at our weekend workload, it was a heavy workload. We would get about 15 to 20 new consults per day. And then we have several rounding teams in the hospital during the week, and those rounding teams check out their patients to the weekend cardiologist and equally give half to each cardiologist to round on. So each cardiologist is usually looking at somewhere between 30 and 40 patients that they are seeing each day. In addition to those duties, they take ER transfer calls throughout the day and night. And then we do echo imaging and stress testing during the weekends. And those 2 weekend cardiologists are responsible for interpreting those studies as well. So it's a busy weekend. So in September of 2024, we had a big cardiology meeting, and at that time, our electrophysiologists let the group know that they were planning to come out of general cardiology call at the end of June 2025. And starting in July 2025, they would then start doing EP only call 24/7. So their call burden for the electrophysiologist would be heavier as far as the amount of days that they cover, but the call for EP only is much less onerous than general cardiology call. So that lets you know the kind of strain that was put at that time on the general cardiologist and what we were facing going forward. So, as you can imagine, our non-invasive cardiologists were not happy about this decision. Obviously, they were now facing heavier weekend call. There was already growing dissatisfaction among the general cardiologists because over the years, as the different specialists pulled out of general cardiology call, more and more of the burden was placed on the general cardiologists, and they were not happy about it. And we knew that we had some of our general cardiologists that were in jeopardy of burnout. And my big concern was turnover, and we did experience some of that over the last 3 years. And this also threatened our patient access in the clinic by creating more work on the hospital side that reduced our manpower on the outpatient side and made our patient access for both new and return patients worse and put our long-term program stability in jeopardy. So obviously, it was critical for our group to try to come up with a solution. So the big question was, how do we protect patient care and the quality of care, which is very important to us, while we also reduce physician burnout? We know that quality suffers when our physicians are overextended. For the last couple of years, we actually used locums coverage from other companies to help us with interventional call coverage. And we also used general cardiologists in the office to see new patients only to help us with patient access. But the locums use that we had over the last couple of years, the results were mixed and physician quality was inconsistent. So reducing the weekend call burden was essential to us in order to build a sustainable long-term staffing model. So let's talk a little bit about how we found the right staffing partner. So these four things were what I and others with cardiology felt were musts if we were going to have a viable long-term solution for a call relief program. We needed quality cardiologists. That was number one. We needed a consistent panel of cardiologists that primarily wanted to work weekends. We would like to have early career cardiologists. And part of this reason, with our experience with locums over the past couple of years, many of the candidates that were presented to us were late in their career or already retired, and they weren't looking for heavy work burdens. They were looking for some work, but also to slow down late in their careers. So we wanted more of the early career cardiologists that were eager to work. And then we also were interested in a company that would be able to provide us with long-term candidates, not necessarily somebody that we're going to see 1 or 2 weekends and then move on to different cardiologists, because we knew that quality would suffer with that. So Sloan Albert is our senior vice president of Centra Medical Group, and she's also a MedAxiom member. She has significant experience with cardiology in her past, and she actually emailed me regarding Moonlighting Solutions and that they were an industry partner of MedAxiom and recommended that I look into the company. So I did my research. I went to the website. There were some white papers available with MedAxiom that I was able to review, and it clearly piqued my interest. So I reached out to the executives with Moonlighting Solution and asked for a meeting. And during our initial meeting on Teams, it was clear that Moonlighting Solutions offered a viable solution that would provide call relief and positively impact our organization. So if you look at the top of the diagram, we have our physicians that cover the weeknight calls, and then our plan was to have a combination of Moonlighting solution cardiologists and HVI cardiologists cover the weekends. This would allow the cardiologists with Heart and Vascular Institute to have a better work-life balance by reducing the call burden for weekends. We thought that this long-term would help with retention and recruitment. And then because less of the cardiologists would need to be off after a weekend of work, we would be able to increase the days of clinic in the office and help with patient access. So some of the things that were impressive about the Moonlighting Solutions cardiologists and their model: most of the Moonlighting Solutions physicians are in advanced fellowship programs, or they are employed in established cardiovascular practices. As our bylaws with Centra, our cardiologists needed to either be board certified or board eligible, so they could not be fellowships and or fellows in general cardiology training. So several of our candidates ended up being in structural programs or interventional cardiology fellowships or EP fellowships. Moonlighting Solutions has quality physicians with reputations and commitment to their communities. Moonlighting Solutions has no medical malpractice claim payouts in their history, which was very important to us. What I found as I interviewed the cardiologists with Moonlighting Solutions is they had the capacity and the desire to take on extra work. They wanted to work weekends, and many of them wanted to be able to work at least 1 weekend per month. It was typical for Moonlighting Solution physicians to have an average of 2 or more years in the same assignment. So this fit our need for having some more long-term sustainability, again, helping with quality if we don't have a constant turnover of cardiologists covering the weekends. And interestingly, Moonlighting Solutions was founded and owned by a heart failure cardiologist who is very patient and physician centric. And I was impressed and able to see this throughout the company once I started talking with the executives and the cardiologists that are employed by Moonlighting Solutions. So, next steps. I needed to present this and build a consensus among the cardiologists that this is something they wanted to do. And I also needed to build a business case. So the sell to the non-invasive cardiologist, as you can imagine, was a pretty easy sell. I did present them with the MedAxiom white paper as a reference. It showed that there was a positive impact on patient well-being, patient care, recruitment, retention, and that it was cost effective. And the white paper also provided examples from other health systems that have partnered successfully with Moonlighting Solutions. So after presenting the information, allowing them to review it, we met, discussed Moonlighting Solutions and its potential for a call relief program for the weekends. And then I sent out an email requesting an internal vote just of the general cardiologist. And their two options were to either have a call relief program where we had one Moonlighting Solutions cardiologist and one HVI cardiologist on call each weekend, or we would have an option of Moonlighting Solutions covering both days every weekend. And the vote came out in favor of having one Moonlighting Solutions cardiologist and one Heart and Vascular Institute cardiologist each weekend. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Jeff Beneke. Jeff Beneke is my excellent dyad partner at Heart and Vascular Institute and is the vice president of Heart and Vascular Institute. And he's going to talk a bit about the business case that we made to present to our Centra executives.
Thank you, Jim. So as we looked at the business case, one of the things we had to look at was the approval process that we have at Centra is we have a medical group provider labor council, meets on a weekly basis. It does include Sloan, our senior vice president, our medical group chief financial officer, and then also our director for provider recruitment, which is Allison on the call today. But in addition to that are all these service line dyads. And the format for that is we bring forward a business case, usually includes an SBAR and a pro forma. And then really the group looks at that and comes up with consensus whether to move forward or not. So that was a critical step in getting this to fruition. As we looked at the business case for this, by pulling a provider back into the clinic each day, that created an additional 52 days of clinic where we, in that clinic, added 10 new patients and 9 return patients. The new patients really helped address a couple of issues that we were having. And one was access. That's been a strategic imperative both for our service line, but also the organization overall. Access to cardiology, lead time is about 30 to 40 days. And we were trying to get down below 2 weeks. So as we added the new patients, then of course that creates the downstream revenue. When we factor in the downstream revenue for the diagnostics and the procedures, that really helps make that business case where this is not only reducing access, but a very profitable concept for the organization. And as you see on here, we're also really focused on using less locums because they were seen as additional expense, and also really watching our margins. We had gotten off to a little bit of a slower start in the year with some weather days. But when we brought this in front of that group, they could clearly see the picture coming together where one, we're increasing access, but two, it's also going to be a way that helps improve the finances for the organization. So with that, that became a winning case and we were able to move this forward.
Thank you, Jeff. So let's talk a little bit about our journey from once we made the decision to the first shift. And I will add to Jeff's comments that one of the things when we were presenting this to the Centra executives is I was very careful to refer to Moonlighting Solutions as our call relief partners. And I did not refer to them as locums, and that was intentional because we do want to look at this as a long-term partnership. And we knew that our Centra executives do not look kindly on the term of locums. So we were trying to get away from that as we move forward with our partnership. So we had criteria that was defined to Moonlighting Solutions of what we wanted for our ideal candidates. And Moonlighting Solutions did the heavy work at that point, pre-vetting the applicants. And then they would send only the ones that met our requirements to me for review. And then I would personally review each of the CVs. And then I would provide approval if we thought they would be a good candidate, and then they would advance to the interview stage. All of the interviews were done on Teams and included the candidate, myself, and with most of them, our medical director for non-invasive cardiology would join me as well. And the medical director and myself, we were both very impressed with the consistent quality of the cardiologists that were presented to us over time. From there, we would let Moonlighting Solutions and then Allison Mabry know that we would like to move ahead with the candidates for credentialing. And the average time from the initial interview on Teams to being credentialed was about 92 days. When they were scheduled for their first weekend, they would come the Friday before and they would spend that day with getting tours of the hospital and also being oriented to our electronic health records, which currently is Cerner. And then, especially for the first weekends that the cardiologist would be on call with us, I would personally check in with them by text at least a couple times during the weekend to see how things are going. Importantly, they have plenty of support during their weekends as there is an interventional cardiologist on the entire weekend and are around most of the time. There are now electrophysiologists on call, and then we have 3 APPs that are there to help them on the weekend as well. So we now have all of our shifts covered with Moonlighting Solutions for the weekends through the end of this year, as well as some early months of 2026. And again, Moonlighting Solutions pre-vetted them and presented the candidates to us. The candidates are covering primarily 6 a.m. on Saturday to 6 p.m. on Sunday, so 36-hour shifts. There's 2 or 3 times during the year where we ask them to cover a full 48 hours to help with one of our cardiologists that travels from Farmville to take call. But most of the time, it's going to be 36-hour shifts. Moonlighting Solutions provides all the required information up front to support credentialing, which makes things very easy on us. The process has been very smooth so far. And our onboarding team has been quite pleased with the process with Moonlighting Solutions and what they have been able to partner with Centra. So let's look at some of our early outcomes. So we now have a continuous pipeline of quality candidates. We have about 12 now that have either been credentialed or are in the credentialing process. And we have been pleased with the candidates that we have to date. Credentialing has been supported with complete and accurate information from the start. We, again, had worked with other locums companies, so we had something to compare to, and the onboarding process has been much smoother with Moonlighting Solutions. The central onboarding teams are aligned and satisfied with the Moonlighting Solutions teams. We have had very positive feedback from the HVI providers regarding Moonlighting Solutions cardiologists. I reach out on Monday after weekend call to any of the providers that worked with Moonlighting Solutions cardiologists to get their feedback, and it has been very positive. And the on the flip side, the Moonlighting Solutions cardiologists have been very positive about their experiences, even though they all say it is as billed and very busy when they're working on the weekends. So it's worked out very well. We have been provided with high quality cardiologists with a strong work ethic. And the biggest thing from the Moonlighting Solutions is they very much value the APP support that they get on the weekends. So some of the early wins with the call relief program, for the first time in several years, we have recruited 2 new general cardiologists. And this has been much more difficult. We now know, based on MedAxiom data that has been presented, that we are losing about 550 cardiologists to the market every year. So we know that competition for recruitment is going to get even more difficult in the future. So we are looking at anything that we can do to have a competitive edge in a tough market. We know that having this call relief program has now provided a better work-life balance for our general cardiologists. They are now taking, on average, about 4 weekends of call per year, which really is helpful from a work-life balance standpoint. Physician well-being is improved. We anticipate that this will reduce burnout, and we'll talk a little bit about a survey that was provided by Moonlighting Solutions in a bit. And then I'm really happy to say that this is the first time in years, 2025, that we have not had any cardiologist turnover. And I think having this type of call relief program has been helpful for that. So I'm going to now bring in Allison Mabry, who is our Director of Recruitment, Onboarding, and Retention, and let her talk about her experience with Moonlighting Solutions. Allison, are you on mute? Yeah, others are indicating, Allison, that they can't hear you, and I can't tell what the issue is.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Thank you, Dr. Warner. From a recruitment retention perspective and a locums management perspective, working with Moonlighting Solutions has been very refreshing. As the director for provider recruitment, I do manage all of our locums for the health system. So I work with multiple different agencies and multiple different credentialing teams. There has been a noticeable difference in the MLS providers as far as quality goes in comparison to the providers at other agencies. The MLS providers have gone through the credentialing process with little to no issues. And if there are issues that come up, they have been addressed very timely and effectively. Our credentialing team, like Dr. Warner had mentioned, does meet weekly with the Moonlighting Solutions credentialing teams. We discuss the upcoming providers that are going through the onboarding process and run through any issues that the teams are having. This communication has been extremely thorough, and MLS has been responsive. We've gotten, again, positive feedback from our credentialing team during these meetings. So if there is a provider, an MLS provider, that their start date may be in jeopardy, we'll know about that Monday, and we can address the issue right then. As Dr. Warner had mentioned, our partnership with Moonlighting Solutions, we've been able to secure this call relief coverage. In turn, this has helped us retain our current physicians by helping to prevent burnout. As you all know, burnout is very common among physicians nationally. Roughly about 4 out of 10 physicians experience burnout, which ultimately links to the greater probability of them leaving. So, because of our experience with MLS, we have in HVI, we have decided to work with Moonlighting Solutions for future urology coverage needs and general surgery coverage needs. And so we're really excited about that.
Thank you, Allison. So let's talk a little bit about how we plan to measure success. So I have had several meetings with Chris Palmero, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for Moonlighting Solutions. And we have discussed different ways that we can measure quality, well-being for the cardiologist, and also some metrics that we can look at to show Centra executives our return on investment. So we initially signed a 1-year contract with Moonlighting Solutions, but again, we anticipate this to be a long-term partnership. And interestingly, when we did the initial burnout survey that Chris and I worked on, 11 cardiologists took that survey. There's now 13 cardiologists because of the 2 that we just hired in the last couple of months. And the burnout was pretty low to start with. We'll be looking at this again in 6 months, but I think some of what we saw with that initial survey was because they all knew we had these plans in place several months ago to cut down on their weekend burden. And then the metrics that we are looking at and plan to follow, patient access is a big one because we know that we're going to be putting cardiologists in the clinic more. And we talked about the downstream revenue that goes along with that. Physician productivity we will monitor, as that should likely go up as well. And then when you're spending more time in the clinics and less call and less time off, then you have cardiologists that are ordering more imaging and procedures, which we should see those volumes increase as well. So we will track that and then present that information to the Centra executives as we make a case for putting this in the budget for 2027. It has already been approved for the budget in 2026. So what's next? What's beyond what we've looked at so far? We have been very pleased with how things have gone so far. And so we talked a little bit about the projected long-term results and scalability. We're going to need to be able to show this if we are going to be able to convince the Centra executives to continue to fund something like this year in and year out. And then we're also going to evaluate again going forward. Do we want to continue with our current model of 1 Moonlighting Solutions and 1 heart and vascular cardiologist every weekend, or do we want to expand that? The reason why at some point we may want to expand it is we currently have 4 cardiologists that provide critical care cardiology services and heart failure services during the week, but they don't cover during the weekend. And some of those patients are our sickest patients. We are in talks of expanding our shock program. We do have an ECMO program here. So if you've got physicians on the weekends that don't have experience with those sick patients, that can potentially be a quality program. So they are considering creating a 24/7 critical care cardiology team, which if that happens, 4 more cardiologists are going to be coming out of the general call pool, and we may need to look at expanding our call relief on the weekends. And then Allison also mentioned the potential to expand into urology and general surgery for Moonlighting Solutions. So at that point, we will stop and open things up to questions. I again want to thank everybody that attended the webinar. I want to thank MedAxiom and Moonlighting Solutions for their help in setting this up. It's something that I really enjoyed doing.
Thank you, Dr. Warner. Again, this is an opportunity for anybody to pose questions to the panel. You can enter your question in the Q&A button at the bottom, and we'll get to those as we work through our questions here. But I do have a few questions that have already been submitted. The first one, and Dr. Warner, I don't know if you want to take it or designate somebody else on the panel to answer it. Why did Centra Cards not choose to have the entire weekend coverage covered by MLS cards?
That's an excellent question, and I was a little bit surprised by the outcome of the vote, but I was also impressed by the reasonings for why they got to where they did. There were actually some of the cardiologists, and interestingly, the vote kind of came down to uh, the the younger cardiologists wanting to have all weekend days covered, and the more seasoned cardiologists wanting to still be part of weekend call. And I think there's a couple reasons. One is, I think from a quality standpoint, having cardiologists there that know the system, know the hospitalists and the ER physicians can be beneficial. It can be difficult if you've got two cardiologists that are not familiar with the system doing the work on the weekend. So that was one thing. And the other thing, though, was when you start looking at reducing the call burden, part of the compensation models for the cardiologist is being able to cover calls. So if you take all weekends out of call, there likely was going to be some impact on the compensation for the cardiologist.
So do you consider this to be a long-term partnership, Dr. Warner?
Oh, I do. I think it will likely continue in its current form. Again, where I think it may increase as far as the call would be if we have more cardiologists that are moving into subspecialized call. Again, we are trying to do anything creative that we can do to actually reduce the workforce in the hospital, because as you keep moving cardiologists from the clinic to the hospital to do more work, you are creating a significant patient access problem in the clinics. So I'm trying to push off any additional specialty call as long as I can, because I think it's going to impact the general cardiologist more if it happens.
So how are the MLS cards supported during the weekend?
So actually, as I mentioned earlier, they have a lot of APP support. We have two of our advanced practice providers that are dedicated to just weekend calls. So, and they are two of our most experienced APPs as well. So they're very high quality. They can function most of the time on their own. And then we have a third APP that rotates through our normal pool of APPs within cardiology. So there's three every weekend. So when they are on call on Saturday, two of the APPs are dedicated to them. So they help them see the consults, they put in orders, and then the cardiologist discusses it with them, and they will go in and add a little addendum. So most of the work on the electronic health records is done by the APPs, and it allows them to then be able to cover that high volume of patients. And some of the patients, particularly the rounding patients, are able to be seen independently by the APPs and do not necessarily need to be seen by the cardiologist. And then if there are high-level questions that come up, they've got electrophysiologists on call and interventional cardiologists on call with them as well to support them.
Okay, I've got another question here. My system started using virtual APP Nocturnus to cover night and weekends and has been highly successful. Backup MD are on call for STEMI, shock, and urgent overnight issues where patients need to be seen. Do you see this as a viable alternative that can be used on a larger scale? We have one APP covering 250 beds and 4 100-bed hospitals. Mike, this might be a question that you'd be best to answer.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and thanks for bringing that up. And for the folks that I have not met yet on this call, my name's Mike Gunther. I'm the CEO of Moonlighting Solutions. I think it's great to see folks employing different solutions out there to address some of the challenges that we're facing in cardiology, right? There are staffing issues that are pretty endemic, and finding APP solutions, physician solutions, lots of different things, I think is imperative at this point. And so we've seen some other programs use virtual APPs, and I think that's great where appropriate. I think in this situation, we have to think about sort of what we were trying to solve for, and the situation that Dr. Warner and team were dealing with. And this is a really busy program, is very high acuity. And I'm not sure a virtual APP really could have filled the gap here, and Dr. Warner, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, the value of having an on-site, sort of academic cardiologist available to support, with the volumes that you guys are seeing is really what kind of helps solve some of that weekend burden versus having an APP, cover sort of a large amount of facilities and virtually. Not to say that there's anything wrong with, there's some really great, highly trained APPs out there who are fantastic. But I think in this situation, I'm not sure this would be a viable solution for what you all needed.
Yeah, Mike, I would agree. Interestingly, we looked at considering having APPs be able to cover and take calls at night. But one of the concerns we have, just as we have with the cardiologist, is recruitment and retention. And we have had more turnover with APPs than we have with cardiologists. And it takes a lot to onboard an APP into cardiology. And so once we get them, we want to keep them. And I think one of the things that makes our service line attractive is that we have avoided requiring them to take night call or weekend call. They cover weekends during the day, but most of that's done by dedicated APPs. So I think it's helped us from a retention standpoint to not have them cover call at this point. But I think it is creative to have something like that. I think systems are going to have to look at several different ways that we are going to cover cardiology call and inpatient outpatient services going forward, because there's not enough cardiologists to do it.
I have another question that's been posed. We've had feedback from busier cardiology services that lean on APPs to provide more than 90% of their call coverage as a potentially more affordable option. Did you consider expanding your APP coverage internally as an alternative? From your experience, what has the Centra team found beneficial by having board certified cardiologists to assist your APPs in providing coverage?
Yeah, so that's a lot to unpack. But I think it's a great question, and I do think, again, going forward, we're going to have to look at more creative ways. And one of those things is different ways that we use our APPs, and we are already looking at ways to allow our APPs to work more independently. They are seeing some new patients in the office that are lower risk. The higher risk ones are done by the cardiologists. They see most of the follow-up patients in our office. And again, we did not do this up until about a year ago, but we are allowing our APPs to function more independently in the hospital. And I think those kind of things are going to end up expanding as the workforce for cardiology continues to decrease. So we don't, I think from a quality standpoint, the cardiologist currently would like to be the primary caregivers for cardiovascular care at this point. But if we find it more and more difficult to recruit and as more cardiologists retire, then we're going to have to look at other ways.
Mike, can you discuss your ability to service areas outside of Virginia and North Carolina?
Yeah, these programs take a considerable amount of lift to get them up and running. And as we know, we're all kind of dealing with a bit of a shortage here, right? And so pulling together a group of cardiologists who have the bandwidth to support these kind of programs can be a little bit difficult, right? And so we have to be really thoughtful about our approach and where we go and how many programs we will set up in any given state. The nice thing is Moonlighting Solutions has been doing this for going on 19 years now. And we have a very deep bench of cardiologists. As Dr. Warner had mentioned, we have a physician founder, advanced heart failure cardiologist founder. And so our network of cardiologists across the US is, I want to say, is approaching or probably just exceeding about 3,000 cardiologists. And so that said, we're still, again, really thoughtful about where we're going. And so we're kind of focused in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, the Southeast, and into the Midwest right now. So we have not launched programs down in the Texas area or further west than Wisconsin, but we are probably looking at doing that in early 2026.
And just as a reminder, MedAxiom and Moonlighting Solutions have been partners for almost 20 years now. So we're coming up toward the top of the hour. I'll leave the Q&A open for a few more minutes, but at the moment we don't have any more questions. Jeff, Allison, or Dr. Warner, I'll turn it over to you if you have any closing comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I did want to mention, I failed to mention it earlier. I think Moonlighting Solutions has been very creative in looking for different pools of experienced cardiologists. And one of the pools that we have found very helpful to us is physicians that are in the military, and in particular Walter Reed, where their volume of work for the cardiologists there has significantly gone down since COVID. So they are looking for other programs that they can reach out to and cover weekends just to get more experience and work. So that's not been something typical that was presented to us previously, but has been very helpful. And I think we have 3 or 4 right now of our candidates that are coming from Walter Reed, which I think has been great.
It's terrific. Jeff or Allison, any closing comments?
Sure. I just wanted to say that Moonlighting Solutions has been a wonderful business partner and a very reliable clinical addition to our staff and our weekend coverage. And so they're been wonderful to work with, and look forward to ongoing partnership here.
And I'll mention, again, Moonlighting Solutions. We are in the beginning stages of working with them for urology and general surgery. And, I know that the teams on those service lines feel very prepared and know that Moonlighting Solutions will take care of them just because of the experience they've heard that cardiology has had. So that will kind of be my closing statement there.
Thanks, Allison. Mike, any final comments before we close out the webinar?
Just really appreciate everyone from the Centra team, taking part in this webinar, and thank you, MedAxiom, for hosting this. I think, one of the big challenges is just getting this information out there, helping folks understand that there are solutions out there for some of these challenges with burnout, and ways to sort of think creatively in how to improve access, improve retention, right? Improve recruitment. It's an incredibly competitive market out there. How do you stand apart, right, from some of your competitors? And there are options out there. And so it really helps to have the folks who've implemented these programs. You're using them, benefiting from them to tell this story. And so I just really appreciate y'all doing that. And thank you, MedAxiom, for hosting this.
And thank you. I encourage all of our members, if you have any questions, to reach out to Mike and the Moonlighting team. As a reminder, we have recorded this. We'll be pushing this out through the Daily News and some other channels, so keep an eye out for that. But with that, I want to close, say thank you to Centra, thank you to Moonlighting, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.